Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the 2026 Chevy Colorado. But more specifically, this is the ZR2. So it's the most expensive and off-road capable trim level of the all-new Colorado, and it's quickly becoming one of my favorite mid-size trucks. This one is in a color that Chevy likes to call Summit White, which I think looks really nice in person and complements all the black accents quite well. But despite all that, it's not perfect. So today we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the all-new Chevy Colorado to help you guys at home decide if it might be the right mid-size truck for you, or if you should leave it at the lawn and look at the other mid-size truck competition. So today you can expect to see a walk around, all the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 on GPS, and then my final thoughts. And huge thanks to Twin Falls Chevy in Southern Idaho for letting me borrow this one for the day. I'll link them below if you're interested because they sell below MSRP, they ship all over the country. They're even willing to pull this one out of the showroom floor so I could film it to show you guys today. And with that said, let's dive right into this review. And thank you so much for watching car videos on YouTube today. But if you get anything out of this video, you like my video presentation style, or you just like the ZR2 Colorado, please be so kind to consider liking this video. That lets me know to make more stuff like this. It helps the video get shared, but it'll also help you by having YouTube choose to show you more stuff just like this. Thank you so much. But if you're new to Chevy, or the Chevy Colorado, there's a few cool things that you should probably know. Chevy is an all-American automaker. They are founded in Detroit, Michigan in the year 1911, and since then they have grown into a company that sells several million vehicle units globally every single year. But the Colorado nameplate, that didn't come out until the 2004 model year, and there have been 3 generations ever since. This is still part of the 3rd generation that came out for 2023, and when it came out 4 model years ago, it was kind of a big deal. They were kind of hard to find. Now they are a little bit more popular. They've sold almost 100,000 units in the last year. These are sold both in the United States and Canada. This one specifically was assembled in Missouri, and the Colorado nameplate, even though it's had 3 generations, it's grown a lot in size over the years. The mid-size truck that Chevy used to have was actually a compact. That was the S10, and that could be had in a regular cab or an extended cab. You saw very few double cab versions of the old S10, but now the Colorado for 2027, for 2026, is only offered in a 4-door short bed configuration. A work truck two-wheel drive starts about $34,000. If you want a ZR2 like this, it's about $50,000 starting before destination delivery, and the good options that this one has. So after all that, it does MSRP for about $56,000. Before $56,000, what do you get in your Chevy Colorado? You get a truck that, although it has not been crash test rated for this new model year, it still comes with all the standard and optional safety features. So everything from really bright LED headlights up front, to blind spot monitoring on the mirrors, to a 360-degree camera, a bunch of parking sensors, and then adaptive cruise control with lane keep assist. And while this system does not work the best compared to every other vehicle I've driven, it does work fairly well, or fairly competitively compared to a lot of the other trucks. You do wander around in your lane a little bit, and the system can get confused when there is kind of a difference in the road and it's not just perfectly straight lines. But with that said, it still works for about 20 seconds in my simulation course. Beyond all that, this is the ZR2, so you get everything from the 33-inch MT tires, to the flow tie, to the skid plate, to a really good approach and departure angle for a mid-sized truck, and a lot of other fancy bits like the adaptive suspension with reservoirs, and 10.7 inches of ground clearance. But then where you're going to be spending most of your time is likely on the interior. And in there, you have a synthetic seat that has ventilated and heated seat features with the power options. They even have memory seats for the driver. You also have a very hot heated steering wheel, a sunroof, a bunch of screens with reflective glass, and a few other things that you'll just have to wait to see throughout this video. I imagine that about 25 years ago, when you could still buy a 2-wheel drive, regular cab, small compact truck S10, probably nobody would have believed you if you said, hey, in about 25 years, this is going to be the smallest truck that Chevy puts out. I think they would have laughed. I probably would have. It's crazy that this is the smallest mid-sized truck. There's no longer a compact truck, and you can't even get this in a regular cab or an extended cab anymore. Overall, though, it does drive and handle the road quite well, and like a lot of other mid-sized trucks these days, overall it's about 17.75 feet long. Because this is the wide, tall ZR2, it is about 6.6 feet wide, about 6.6 feet tall, and the wheelbase is roughly 11 feet, which is fantastic. Because the front independent suspension on this third generation did get moved up a little bit, just look at that crazy front approach angle. It's fantastic. And then because this is only a 5'1" bed, the rear departure angle, it's okay, but trucks usually are not class leaders in rear departure, nor are they in breakover. But this truck, it probably weighs about 4,600 pounds. Even being the ZR2 with the Multimatic suspension, it still has a 1,255 pound payload, which is actually pretty impressive. I think last year when I drove the Bison, that was down to around 1,050 or something in that ballpark. But some of the other Colorados, like the work trucks, they can haul up to about 1,500 pounds, so keep that in mind as reference. And then this one does have about 10.7 inches of ground clearance. The range on the Colorados from the work truck is 7.9 inches up to the ZR2 Bison, which is about 12.2. This one still has a 342 final axle ratio, does have a front and rear locking differential, and it can do a full circle in a little bit over 40 feet. The last couple things to mention out here is the gas door is located on the driver's side, and while this does have a huge fender flare, it really isn't shaped that strangely like it could be, or as it is on some other vehicles. There is a little bit of a crease, but when you lock the vehicle, the gas door doesn't lock, so the bums might attempt to siphon some of your 21.4 gallons of gas. The way that the ZR2 is rated, it's going to get about 17 city, about 17 on the highway, so your max road trip and range, if you're conservative, is about 363 miles. And then it has a square stance all around. A 33-inch Goodyear Wrangler MT tire that has about 15-30 seconds of tread. And it has a full-size spare, but it's not matching. Unfortunately, you don't get the same wheel. You get a cheap Steely wheel, and it's just right there under the bed. And then this is your key. You have lock, you have unlock, you have panic button, and you have remote start. But you honestly could just leave this in your pocket because you do have proximity key features right there to lock and unlock the vehicle. You also have a key hidden in your remote. You just have to push the button and pull it out. So if your battery ever goes dead, that's how you can still access your vehicle. The driver's side door panel is easy to open, and it does feel pretty solid. The window overall is adequately sized. I'm 5'11", and this corner is maybe just a hair above my head. But there is about a 2.5 foot threshold to get into this vehicle. And while this ZR2 does have the nice rock rails, they're actually mounted to the body. From what I can tell, they are not mounted to the frame, which is unfortunate. And then they don't act as a step, because when a truck this tall doesn't even have an A-pillar, you are gonna have to be taller or jump pretty good to get into this. Anyways, the door panel is pretty nice. You have a few different accent trim pieces, but the door card and the armrest is nice. You still have an upper storage tray. While it's not very big, it might hold some candy, and then you can hold your bottle down here. I'm surprised that the ZR2 honestly doesn't have more storage in the door. There's the real estate for it. I'm not sure what Chevy was thinking. And while this does have an upgraded Bose sound system, you don't get that advertised on the door. You're gonna have to look at the dashboard for that. But then, checking it out, this is actually a pretty nice approach. You have memory seats. They're powered, they're heated, they're ventilated. You have maybe just a tiny bit of room you can hide stuff underneath the seat, behind or between the seat rails. You have all-weather mats with the Chevy emblem. I'm surprised there isn't a ZR2 logo. You have the OBD2 port, rubberized pedals, hood release. Unfortunately, there's no knee airbag warning. And then you have a trailer brake. These can tow about 6,000 pounds, and if it was not a ZR2 but a high trim level, it could tow about 7,700. You have the dashboard lighting, ventilation, kind of like a camo carbon fiber theme. That's pretty neat. Some Hobby Lobby yellow stitching. And then you have a heated leather-wrapped steering wheel. Unfortunately though, there's no ZR2 stamped into the headrest. You do have a lot of halogen headlights throughout this vehicle, and then a sedan-sized sunroof up top. Sitting inside here, like a lot of the other Colorados, it's super nice. The materials, they're soft touch. Everything feels very ergonomically designed. It's well pleasing at 5'11". I can easily find a comfortable driver position. I do have to say that these seats have almost no bolstering, so they're gonna accommodate a lot of different body types, but they're not gonna hold anyone in very well if you're going fast around a corner. But because this has raised suspension, you're probably not gonna be going fast around corners anyways. I love the hood bulge. I love that TurboMax is listed on the sides of it, and when you fire it up, all the glass becomes at least just as reflective as it was before. You have a few different controls, ways that you can access the infotainment screen. They're honestly all pretty cool. You have a lot of options, and then the next one would be the map. But you still have to turn the headlights on going through here, or because this is not all set up, staying in demo mode, you access way too much stuff through the screen. I don't like that. Just check out those options. Even to do the power window lockout, you have to push a button through the screen. You don't have that just next to the window buttons where it could easily fit. So anyways, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, so you have everything you need. You do have a tiny bit of storage up there. I love that you do have the Bose speaker listed, at least where you as the driver are gonna constantly be reminded by that. Vents basically everywhere. Ventilation, I have the ventilated seats on. In my driving portions, we're gonna experience that a little bit more when I have more bun time in the seat, but they are kind of loud, and initial impressions right now, it takes a little bit of time for them to get going, but the heated feature, that works really well. These get hot. So does the heated steering wheel. It gets super hot. And then these are your options down here. You have your lockers, you have auto start stop. When I got into this, I actually had to turn lane keep assist on, so keep in mind a lot of vehicles come from the factory with it turned off, and I don't know why. You can set up an aux, and then you have windows. You can roll them all down. This one also has a wireless charger, some plugins. The 360-degree camera is actually pretty clear, and you can see my surroundings quite well. The trajectory lines even move, and I love that you can usually leave the Chevy cameras on while you're driving the vehicle if you want. This also has a transfer case that has 4 auto, so you're not just limited to 2 high or 4 high or 4 low. You can actually drive around and it'll only kick in when needed. You have an electronic parking brake. You have some cup holders with the camo feature, and you can hold a phone right there. And then you have the center console with a lifty tray. But even on this one, you only have a 12-volt plug-in down there. It's not overly huge. And then you have controls for the sunroof to slide or to tilt, because that is a manually sliding, tilting window back there. What am I saying? It's a sliding window, not a tilting window. With that said, let's turn this off. We will hop in the back, and because it's very hot outside and this car's been sitting in the sun for a long time, I'm gonna leave the HVAC on and we're gonna see how well the vents work in the back. I have got to say that this is one good-looking mid-sized truck. But usually the compromise of mid-sized trucks is, although they are almost as long as full-size trucks, the back seats are usually fairly tight. So we're gonna see if that's the case back here. The Maroni sticker fits actually pretty well. You have a lot of surface area that's not taken up by it, but you can see that the belt line goes up a little bit higher. The window is a little bit shorter overall. And then you still have, you know, about a 2.5 foot tall threshold. Honestly, should have brought it out the tape measure to show you guys exactly. But there's also no B-pillar handle, and for the reason, I have no idea why Chevy decided to do that. You do have a little bit of storage under the back seat bench. It is a 40-60 split, and you have your tire changing tools. And then because this opening is not huge, you have to be careful that when you're jumping up, you don't hit the roof, which is only about an inch or less above my head. Actually, I think if I went straight at it, I'd probably lose some brain cells. Anyways, whew, that was careful. Very, very lucky right there. Anyways, I have just enough room to be comfortable going across town, maybe between towns, but I don't know if, as a full-size adult, if I'd want to be in the back seat. Of course, the driver could move their seat up a little bit. That would help. And I honestly do have the seat further back than usual, or angled back further when I am filming. But the vents, I can feel that they're cold, but they're not blowing as hard as they are in the front for it being about halfway fan speed. And then you have some plugins down there. You have a fold-down armrest. And then at 5'11", headroom is fine if I'm sitting with really good posture. But if I lean, okay, if I lean forward, only my hat barely clips it. The rest of me is doing okay. And from sitting really high up, this is my view. I can barely see that there even is a sunroof right there, but I can certainly tell that there's a big bulge. So with that said, let's hop out and I'll show you the bed. And I have got to say that I really like the rear end of the Chevy Colorado, especially the ZR2 with those mud flaps. I mean, the fenders don't necessarily look any wider than the other Colorados, but with the tires sticking out a little bit more near the bottom, this is just such a nice angle. You can see just how fresh those tires are. Again, they have almost half an inch of tread, although I do have to say, after running MT tires on my old supercharged lifted FJ Cruiser, these might not be the tire that you want in the winter if you experience winters with a lot of snow and ice. Back when I had the FJ, it did not grip very well in the snow, so keep that in mind and do some of your own research. But the tailgate with Chevrolet, the letters stamped in, already filled in with the decals, blacked out badges, the ZR2 emblem right there. Man, this thing looks really good. And then you guys have told me in the comments that you don't just need the key inside to lock it. And you weren't fibbing. This thing does lock, which is really cool. Overall though, it's only a 5'1" bed, or about 61.7 inches. The height is roughly 21 inches. Between the wheel wells, you have about 45.5, and between everything that's not the wheel wells at the widest point, it's about 58 and some change. So overall, you have roughly 42 cubic feet of room back here before you start toppling over and spilling out. And honestly, this is a really good looking bed. It's probably never gonna look this clean again. Having the Chevy bow tie stamped in, having 2 tie downs at each corner, and you even have the baby 400 watt output right there. This overall is a pretty decent bed for a mid-sized truck. And with that said, let's move on to the passenger side. There's not really anything new that's on the passenger side. A lot of the trim around the windows, it's painted to match the rest of the body. It's not blacked out, but the side mirrors are shiny black. There's not really any reflectiveness to that. And I'm surprised that for $56,000, you don't have a turn signal in the mirror, which is kind of interesting to me. Then the door panel, it looks really nice. You're missing a few of the switch controls that the driver gets. This one does not have memory seats either, or a power seat. Again, for 56 grand, I know it's extremely capable off-road, but I think Chevy, I mean, we know where they're skimping out a little bit between that and the halogen lights. Anyways, my backpack is enjoying the heated and the ventilated features, and I think it's having a pretty good time. It even finished a full Kirkland water bottle. And then additionally, where is the transmission tunnel storage or above the glove box? A lot of the other mid-sized trucks, or some of them anyways, and the full-size trucks, they have storage up there, and I wish Chevy would have incorporated that. I think ZR2 is really cool on the interior, but personally, I would rather have more function over more form, and I think they could have instilled that right there. And then the glove box. It's adequately sized, so I'm not going to complain too much, although a 12 volt would have been nice to have in there. And with that said, let's come around to the front. I'll pop the hood, and I'll show you what the TurboMax and the 8-speed transmission look like. Under the hood is the 2.7 liter TurboMax engine. So it's basically an inline 4-cylinder with a big turbo right there on the passenger side. I've heard that this engine is styled after the diesels. It is direct injection. You can see there's no engine cover or anything on it. And it does make a whopping 310 horsepower at about 5,000 RPM. And then it does make a whopping 430 pound-feet of twisty torque, which is nearly earth-shattering for a mid-sized truck, and more than the first generation 5.3 liter V8 Colorado used to make, and that comes on at 3,000 RPM. So overall, because this is the engine that is found in the bigger, heavier Silverado, and it's a high volume engine, I think it's gonna be pretty reliable in this platform. It's not as heavy of a vehicle, it doesn't tow as much, it's not as stressed out just in daily driving. I think this engine has a lot going for it to potentially be very reliable, but comment below what your thoughts and experiences are with it. I will say in first gear, you can sometimes hear a little bit of turbo whistle, which sounds fantastic. And then everything else under the hood, you have the battery, you have a reservoir, you have a fuse box, you have some more reservoirs over here. The air filter goes right into the baffling to quiet it down. Honestly, if that was an open intake, that would sound so good, like a less baffled intake. Goes right through the turbo before coming around to the induction side on the driver's side right there. And overall, you can see it takes 5W30 oil, so no super thin oil like a 0W16 like a lot of other vehicles these days. You can see the coil packs. It still has a dipstick, and you can see the serpentine belt, the alternator, and everything there. So this is very much an American engine, very much a Chevy. And with that said, let's drop the hood and take it for a drive. Initial driving impressions of the 2026 Chevy Colorado ZR2. What's funny is I've driven a few ZR2 Bisons, but not the regular ZR2 before, and not having the 35-inch tires certainly makes a difference in the get up and go that this vehicle has without really trying or already up to highway speeds. But like a lot of the other Colorados, visibility is overall fairly decent for a mid-sized truck. Trucks in general don't have as good a visibility as a lot of unibodies and a lot of smaller vehicles because they have an aggressive front fascia. They have a very parallel hood to the ground, so you can't really see that close to the front of the vehicle. But I feel like for as tall as this one is, for having almost 11 inches of ground clearance, you can see fairly close up front. The side mirrors though, like I've said in every other Colorado video, they're a little bit smaller than I would like them to be. Thankfully, you do have blind spot monitoring, but because the side mirrors aren't that big, you're really gonna be mostly just staring at your giant fenders. Those bulging fenders. And when it's time to get down to a lower speed limit to safely corner, there can be a little bit of nosedive if you slam on the brakes. But I think for this vehicle, the brakes are about what you expect. They look to be a 2-pot design up front. And then overall, you know, say you have to pass some highway farm equipment, even without going full throttle, this thing still has pretty good power. Having 430 pound-feet of torque is really nice to rotate those 33-inch tires and help you feel like you're in something special. And at low speeds, when there's not a lot of wind outside, you can sometimes even hear the turbo. But on the interior of the vehicle, it's actually really nice, very composed, especially for being such an off-road monster of a truck that even has a front and a rear locking differential. This thing is extremely capable, but having all the speakers that this has, or half of the dashboard other than the instrument cluster bulge is taken up by speakers, they actually sound pretty good for what you'd expect from this vehicle. The back seats can actually fit full-size adults, which is really nice. And then all of the heated features on the steering wheel and the seats, they actually get really hot. I'm enjoying them, and they haven't even been on that long. So unlike a lot of other vehicles, you don't have to wait too long for them to kick in. I do have to say that the ventilated seat feature, at least on these synthetic seats, it could be better. It blows a lot of air, you can hear it, but I don't feel it any more than just having the regular HVAC aircon controls on, turned to AC, you know, mid-fan speed. So whether that's worth it or not, I don't know. But overall, this is a fun vehicle. It drives well, I like it a lot, and even for being, you know, mid 4,000 pound, feels pretty stable on the road, and I highly recommend you guys test drive one for yourself if you're in the market for something like this. Otherwise, let me get to the private road and we will do a 0 to 60. 0 to 60 in the 2026 Chevy Colorado ZR2. Keep in mind, density altitude's 5,600 feet, so even though this is turboed, it's still down on power, probably almost 10%. I have it in normal mode because there is no sport mode. Traction is off, 4-wheel drive auto is on. We're gonna do a brake rev and see what this TurboMax can do. Really good first gear. Not bad. True 0 to 60 came in at 7.82 seconds. For a mid-sized truck rolling on 33s, that's really not that bad. My final thoughts of the 2026 Chevy Colorado, but specifically the ZR2, the first regular ZR2 and non-Bison Colorado that I've driven. So I like it a lot. I do think it's kind of entertaining, some of the features that this does not come with standard, even at this price point, like all the halogen headlights. Some of the options on the window sticker, like even the base ZR2 doesn't apparently come with adaptive cruise control, something like that. Kind of interesting where Chevy decided to save some money, what they decided to offer you as standard and what they decided to charge you a little bit more for. But overall, as a package, $56,000 isn't cheap, but this is seriously such a cool mid-sized truck. It might be the best looking. I know that that's very subjective, but I personally think that this is really cool. Almost 11 inches of ground clearance. A 33-inch tire from the factory that doesn't have a ginormous, obnoxious wheel. It only has a 17-inch wheel, so it's actually meant for off-road. Has a very good adaptive suspension for being a factory truck. A really good approach angle, and the fact that Chevy actually extended the wheelbase on this to improve the approach angle, although that does hurt the breakover angle, it just shows that they care about this platform. They've put a lot of effort into it. The wheel arches even look like they're big enough to fit a larger tire. And we know that that's the case because the ZR2 Bison comes on 35s. Overall, I think Chevy did a really good job with this. I just wish every single vehicle did not cost as much as it does. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions, because these are just my random thoughts and my random opinions on one random day. And that's all they're worth. I highly recommend you test drive vehicles for yourself. Make sure that you find the right one for you. Don't just take my opinion for it. And anyways, check out the Twin Falls Chevy. They are awesome. And if you got anything out of this review, please consider liking it. Comment those thoughts and opinions below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I can't wait to see you on the next one. Until then, see ya.